I'm your host, Grayson Brulte. Welcome to another episode of SAE Tomorrow Today, a show about emerging technology and trends in mobility with leaders and innovators to make it all happen. On today's episode, we're absolutely honored to be joined by HYSKY Society's founder and executive director, Danielle McLean. On today's episode, we're digging into hydrogen's role in aviation and what it will take, technology, standards, and infrastructure to make it fly and to make it scale. And most importantly, why the Hindenburg disaster is misunderstood. We hope you enjoy this episode. Danielle, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Grayson.
It's good to see you, and have you here. So you're the HYSKY Society, so I'll give you a high five for being HYSKY.
High five for HYSKY. We'll just start with the icebreaker. Hydrogen, especially with the holidays coming up. Can you see it? Let me move my mic.
Oh, you got merch.
I got merch, but look, hydrogen, it won't shoot your eye out. And then we have our little hydrogen molecule just making a face. Hydrogen, it won't shoot your eye out. It is safe.
All right, so let's get into that. Why won't it shoot your eye out? What is behind that for the listener that might not know?
Well, okay, a lot of people. So HYSKY Society, we're advancing hydrogen aviation. We want to decarbonize aviation, and we believe that hydrogen is the best fuel to do that. But a lot of people, especially those of us that are over 40 and 50, have this thing that I did not coin this. I don't know who did, but it wasn't me. But they have Hindenburg syndrome. And when they think about hydrogen in the sky, they think about things exploding. We flew with hydrogen many times before the Hindenburg, and we've flown with hydrogen many times after the Hindenburg. What was so unique about the Hindenburg incident was it happened to be caught on video. So it went viral, even before viral was a thing. And there were also flammable skins on it. I mean, there were all sorts of things wrong with that mission and that flight. And hydrogen really got blamed for it, and it wasn't hydrogen's fault. So I'm not going to say that hydrogen isn't flammable, but it's just as safe as any other fuel that we use in aviation.
So did the Hindenburg syndrome get accelerated because of Robert Plant and Jimmy Page when they put on the Zeppelin album cover and then wow, look at this. Would that accelerate it?
Yeah, definitely. And there was actually, I would call like a smear campaign and misinformation that blamed hydrogen. I have 2 books on unveiling like what really happened in that flight. There was some, propaganda by industries that would not benefit from hydrogen being utilized in aviation. There are a few documentaries, some are free on YouTube. So if you dig into it, it's very interesting, especially if you kind of have like a conspiracy theorist mind. It was a real conspiracy that they did to blame hydrogen, and the audio from the actual video footage was added in. So the people that were in absolute fear and everything, it was added in.
So you can go back to the old saying, always check the metadata.
Yeah, check the metadata. So yeah, definitely research it for sure.
So in your opinion, what do you think really happened with the Hindenburg? What caused it? Was it a structural design, or what do you think really caused that?
Yeah, so it was the way the hydrogen was stored. We didn't have like pressurized tanks and composite tanks. There was flammable paint all over it. And we wrote a white paper about this back in 2020. You can download it. It's not called Hindenburg, but then also they were told not to fly that day because of some weather issues, and they had to make a really sharp turn, and that caused some strain and stress and maybe some sparks and some cracks, and then it was ignited. But hydrogen burns transparent. So those flames that you see, those are not even the hydrogen flames. So there were a lot of things that went wrong with that, but it wasn't because of the hydrogen. Yes, the hydrogen did burn, but that was the first thing to burn, and then it was done, and then it was just the rest of the dirigible burning.
So you published that Hindenburg paper in 2020, 2 years after you found the HYSKY Society. Why wait 2 years after the founding to publish that, since that is, if you want to call it, a critical piece of information in the evolution of hydrogen in aviation?
Yeah. So technically I started in 2019, a for-profit company called Happy Takeoff, and we were building a hydrogen-powered eVTOL. And, as aerospace engineers, we were, researching a lot of this, and we knew that hydrogen did not cause the Hindenburg to blow up. By the way, every time I do a presentation and I'm on stage, I make the entire audience say a chant 3 times. Hydrogen did not cause the Hindenburg to blow up. Hydrogen did not cause the Hindenburg to blow up. Hydrogen did not cause the Hindenburg to blow up. So we knew that. But every time we were doing a pitch or a presentation, we got the question from investors, from regulators. And I mean, we got it every day that we were like, we just need to put this out there. And so actually the paper was called Captive Use Hydrogen for Advanced Air Mobility. And what that means is we wanted to look at the feasibility of making hydrogen on site, because one of the biggest hurdles to implementing hydrogen in aviation is that the transport of that hydrogen is very expensive. So a lot of the cost comes in getting the hydrogen from A to B. So if you could make it on site where you're going to use it, aka captive use, then you can eliminate a lot of those costs. So that was the purpose of the paper. But the first thing we talked about was the Hindenburg. So we're like, we can't even go into what we really want to talk about until we just let people know, what actually happened there. And even after the paper, we still get the question, but we just start everything off with that, like hydrogen did not cause the Hindenburg to blow up. So it was just because we get it so often.
Where does your passion for hydrogen come? Because there's different forms of propulsion. You have a battery with jet fuel, you do all sorts of things, but you have this clear passion for hydrogen. Where's that come from?
Yeah, so that's such a great question. The first design project that I ever worked on as an aerospace engineer was a high altitude UAV that needed to be aloft for at least 24 hours. And it was like kind of like a low Earth satellite type of thing. Think like your Zephyr, like glider, very big wingspan. And it could not have any emissions. And I didn't even know about hydrogen really, but I was on the power and propulsions team. And so there was nothing off limits. We had freedom to do everything we wanted. So we couldn't have any carbon emissions. There was no really supporting infrastructure. So we started with batteries and ruled those out pretty quickly because they were just so heavy. And we looked at helium. We had this humongous spreadsheet and we did like a SWOT analysis and we just swap analysis. And I forget what that stands for, but I know P is power. But anyway, so we went through all that and we had probably 100 different types of fuels and, propulsion systems. And then we looked at hydrogen and we were like, wait, we had like the energy density of all of them or specific energy. They're just comparing all of their values. And we were like, this one actually is abnormally high. And so, then we saw that, okay, we do need a little bit more space to store it. And then we looked at, has anybody ever used it before successfully? And we found, I think it was Boeing, I want to say Phantom, don't quote me on that. But we looked at the tank they used, which was like spherical. And so we implemented that. So that was my first time. And that was over a decade ago. And I didn't even really know that hydrogen could be the sustainable zero emission fuel. Second time was when I got involved in the eVTOL space. And we were looking at, electric flight and extending the range. And I guess in any space where you're trying to have zero emission long range flight, the math and the engineering, it's going to lead you to hydrogen. It will lead you there every time. And so that was the second time. And then the third time, it happened again in designing a sustainable trainer aircraft that was all electric that had to be able to go about 300 miles. So 3 times in my engineering career, the math it converged to hydrogen. So I believe in it until somebody shows me math that proves something better. That's the way to go.
So the math takes you to hydrogen, but on the backside of that, you alluded to it, is infrastructure. Is that one of the keys to scaling, where if you don't have the right infrastructure, you don't have the right hydrogen generation, no matter how good your eVTOL or your aircraft is, you cannot scale and commercialize it?
Yeah, very much so. That is probably the biggest challenge. In fact, that kind of leads to, so I left you hanging a minute ago when I said originally I started a for-profit H2 eVTOL company. And when we were pitching to investors, the question that we got, and as aerospace engineers, we were told hydrogen is the most abundant molecule in the universe. but we didn't really understand that it didn't occur naturally in nature and that it was very expensive. And so investors would ask us, do you have a reliable, affordable source of hydrogen that's comparable to jet fuel? No, we did not. And we were really stuck on that. And that eventually led to that company failing. I don't really like to say failing because it was a very good lesson. And so then we kind of had to go back to the drawing board. And instead of looking at it as like, okay, we've, because we were successfully flying with hydrogen, but we couldn't get funding because we couldn't answer this fuel question. And so we said, what if instead of giving up and going into software engineering or AI like all the other people are doing, leaving this industry, what if we were to reach out to our competitors and see if they're having this problem as well? It turns out that they were. And so that's when we decided, let's start a nonprofit with the mission being we will bridge the gap between hydrogen and aviation. And so that's how HYSKY was founded. And we started, a lot of people say we started from the ground up. We literally started from the sky down, and we started looking at there are refueling stations. There are people that make hydrogen. Let's learn from them. Let's start working with them, and let's start bridging the gap. And so we're working with some companies, really exciting announcements coming out that the technology does exist. We just found that, a lot of folks that are making the hydrogen and making the refueling stations that are affordable don't necessarily know until HYSKY came along that aviation was interested in this. And, the aviation folks that were interested in it didn't know that these technologies existed. So that's where, we really find our sweet spot is to bridge that gap.
How much is the interest in aviation is driven by Airbus, since Airbus has been probably the largest, most vocal, large-scale aircraft manufacturer out there talking about it and running it through their A3 lab in the Valley?
I mean, no offense to Airbus. And also when I worked in industry, I was an Airbus engineer, also a Boeing engineer. But from our end, and no offense, Airbus, because I think you're an amazing company, none from our end, just because the startups are able to go a lot faster. I think, with Airbus and Boeing, these are still R&D projects that could be cut. It's not certain. But when you look at companies like Zero Avia or H2 Fly or Fly H2 or Heaven Drones, when their entire business is based on hydrogen, they're not going to cut that program. And I'm not saying that Airbus is going to, but these companies, their livelihood depends on, bringing this technology to fruition. So we see working with people like that, moving the industry forward a lot faster. Further, they don't need these companies that are, committed to doing hydrogen aviation and hydrogen aviation only. They don't necessarily need an entire airport like DFW to be able to support hydrogen. They maybe just need a little bit to support what they're doing. And that's where we like to start, is we can prove that this works and make it affordable on a small scale. And then we can scale up affordably, where, bigger companies, they really need it to be pretty big right away. So from our point of view, from HYSKY's point of view, and from a startup point of view, Airbus, I'm sure they will contribute to some things, but right now it's really the startups that are moving the needle.
So if you look at that, there's a lot of startups now. I'll call it an ecosystem, which we'll get to in a minute, that's emerging around regional aircraft and revitalizing regional airports. Is that where you see this hydrogen technology initially starting, and let's say the sub 600 mile routes, those that can land in small regionals?
Very much so. We've done several webinars and had special speakers on the benefits of hydrogen in regional aviation and regional air mobility and a lot of underutilized airports. And something else that we've been talking to a lot of airports about is and we're working with some companies, Millennium Rain Energy, one of them, where you can buy a Toyota. If you can get 3 people in your region to purchase a Toyota Mirai from them, they will install a hydrogen refueling station for free. And you think, well, how can they do that? Well, they make money off of the hydrogen that they sell. Well, that refueling station can be at an airport. And so then now the airport has low scale hydrogen infrastructure that you now can do flight tests. You now can put, forklifts in. So you can start, circulating the idea of at very low cost, by the way. These Toyota Mirais, they're selling for pennies on the dollar because there's not really any hydrogen infrastructure. So there are programs that exist. And then if you put that hydrogen refueling station at the airport, you can be bringing people to the airport and kind of using that as a way to, show and promote the idea of hydrogen at your airport and start doing some hydrogen flight tests and bringing that in. But it doesn't have to be this all or nothing sort of thing. I don't even know if I answered your question. I forgot what it was.
Let's say the Franklin, Tennessee Regional Airport, we're going to go buy 6 of these things. And oh, by the way, we're going to get 2 infrastructures. We're going to have them put at the airport because we're the ones buying it. Have you seen the startup invest in that?
Yeah. So yes, we are talking. I'm under NDA, so I can't say too much, but you wouldn't buy the Mirai from Toyota. You would buy the Mirai from, so this company called Millennium Rain Energy is purchasing barely used Toyota Mirais. You can buy them for very cheap and financing is available. And if 3 exist in a certain radius, I forget what the radius is, then you get the infrastructure for free. And then once you get to 7 Mirais in that region, and by the way, this infrastructure is mobile and scalable. So once you get to 7 in a region, then they pull out that small refueling station, they bring you a bigger one. And it can keep scaling up from there. And they've done this in, I think, like 30 plus countries already. And so working with, putting things like that into airports is going to be very exciting to see.
Okay, so for basically roughly, because if you look at the resale value, we're looking at $350,000 for 7 of them. For a well-funded start of $350,000 is not bad. Am I onto something where you can get bigger infrastructure? Because then you got employee vehicles, and you've got write-offs, and we can go down the line of all the perks that come with that.
Exactly. And the cars are not even that much. I mean, some of them are $10,000 for an almost brand new car. I mean, just to give you an example, I was in the market for a used car about 2 years ago. I'm in Texas, and I was researching, eco-friendly cars, and there was a Toyota Mirai, a 2022, I think, Toyota Mirai for $7,000 that had 2,000 miles on it because there's no infrastructure. So they exist. You can get a very nice zero-emission car with like quadruple the range of a Tesla for very cheap. And if you can get a couple other people, or if you're an airport, you can buy 3 of them, you get the infrastructure. And then that also enables you to attract new businesses. So there are many benefits to an airport doing this. And of course, you don't want to be the only airport. So, we talked to say one airport in San Antonio and then another airport in Austin. And we're like, if you two do this, then you can also be on the leading edge of regional air flights in between your cities.
Well, you're getting to the core of this. There's not enough infrastructure from the vehicle side to support that. It doesn't seem to me there's a big enough ecosystem. So on the aviation side, there is capital for airports. A lot of it comes in federal dollars or state dollars. Government's closed, so not make a percent there, but there is funding mechanisms for aviation for that. But is there a big enough ecosystem? So yes, you have the startups that you mentioned, but then there's a whole other group of folks that have to go to make that startup work. Suppliers, fueling, financing. Is that infrastructure there today?
Yeah, very much so. So the company, again, Millennium Rain Energy, that, like I said, they've been implementing this. And by the way, they're not in aviation, but I found them, one of their biz dev people reached out to me, and I'm like, this is literally what aviation needs. This sounds too good to be true. And I mean, that's just how much of a silo we are, as industry people. It was so obviously already solved. And so, yes, it very much works there. It works in automotive, and you'll see quotes like, one hydrogen refueling station I've seen from, 7 million. I've seen from 1.5 million to 7 million to 10 million. No, I mean, we're doing it for $250,000 to $500,000. And that's brand new. That can support 3 Mirais. So it's very feasible, and it's in this case, it's not rocket science. A lot of the times I like to tell people, no, it is rocket science. But in this case, it's technology that's been around for a long time. We just haven't really looked at it from this point of view from aviation, because we often think it needs to, come out as liquid. And that's another piece to it. You can also liquefy it on demand, where you're not sitting there storing liquid hydrogen for days or weeks. Just liquefy it as you need it. And then you can avoid that boil off issue. Like I said, just kind of follow along with the announcements that we'll be putting out in the next year. And I think you'll see like, oh yeah, this is totally doable. And so the airports that get involved in this early, there are use cases for hydrogen, not just in automotive and not just in aviation. Forklifts. So, let's say you're maybe an airport that has, some package and cargo things. If you're using forklifts, a lot of them are powered by hydrogen fuel cells. You're going to find that there are use cases. So even if you don't have the Mirais, you can still sell that hydrogen. So it's going to pay for itself regardless.
Do you see that going at regional airports, or do you see them going to large internationals? You mentioned DFW earlier, so let's use DFW as an example, one of the world's busiest airports. Do you see hydrogen eventually going there?
I mean, eventually it's going to be much more challenging, right? And so then this leads to another opportunity where I would say if I were involved, if I had like a vested interest in DFW and the airlines that fly out of there, I would start a hydrogen airline. I don't have the bandwidth to do it, but I think there's an opportunity to do that. So to answer your question, eventually, but it's going to be very challenging because DFW is very busy, right? And they can't afford to shut down and, take out existing infrastructure and implement. This is why SAF works nicely, for, DFW and large airports and hubs like that. But areas that are not being utilized. So I think regional airports that are underutilized are going to really be the testing grounds for hydrogen. But right now we're really looking at drones, UAVs, eVTOLs, and regional aircraft where hydrogen fuel cells, by the way, I'm talking about hydrogen fuel cells, not combustion. I think that's going to be the sweet spot for hydrogen is in regional air mobility, drones, and that sort of thing. But as the technology progresses and as it becomes more widespread, we may see hydrogen fuel cells and potentially hydrogen combustion coming online for commercial airlines where DFW may be interested. But at that point, it will already be proved out to where it won't be such a risk. But then I think where the opportunity really lies is going to be in the airline, because kind of like I was saying about Airbus and Boeing at the beginning, you have I always forget if it's called like the innovators dilemma or that thing I'm talking about. It's the innovators dilemma or the inventor's dilemma. But you know what? Yes, exactly. And so same with the airlines. It's not, they got too much inertia to really stop what they're doing and invest in hydrogen. So, in 10, 15 years, if nobody's done it, then you bet your bottom dollar you're going to see HYSKY Airlines. Because there needs to be an airline dedicated to hydrogen that, can get the flights at DFW and things like that. And it may just be, one airline that does that in the beginning. And we've seen people invest in zero avia aircraft, so maybe it will be them. But I'm not sure if right now it's a PR move and, no disrespect to these big airlines. I just don't know because they don't publicize these things. But I just think it probably will take an airline that's just focused on that to move the needle forward. And that could operate out of DFW or maybe a regional airport near DFW. I know I, for one, would love the idea of not having to go to DFW. So maybe I'm taking a flight, or maybe it's a direct flight from Houston to New York, so it could change. And I know that complicates things, especially with air traffic control and all of that sort of thing. But the airspace is changing. I mean, the government is changing. Everything is changing. So I don't know what the future holds, but I would say just keep an open mind because nothing is for certain really at this point in time, except for one thing. Hydrogen is the future.
It is the future. And I will say for the record, DFW does shut down. I've been stranded there and stuck there many times for all sorts of reasons.
Not by choice.
Not by choice. No. And it's, I will refrain comment here and I'll be polite. So DFW is home to American AAA. They have a new CEO. Are there teams inside of these large international airlines that are focused on hydrogen, that are thinking about this? And I bring this up because I actually ran into them the other day. You look at Branson at Virgin. Is anybody that forward thinking out there? And then it was funny because he was on the plane when I was on, and he goes, "Thanks for supporting us for 40 years." And like, he had to go sell the record label. That's a whole other conversation, but he's forward thinking. And are you seeing any of these airlines that are actively investing now or building out teams to explore hydrogen and what that could mean for their business?
Yeah, for sure. We've seen United, I think American as well. And then even here, and even DFW, I know they're doing some research, and IAH, there's a feasibility study with Airbus to, explore the feasibility in Houston, which is where I'm at on hydrogen at the airport. They are looking at it, but I think just due to the nature of capitalism and business, that they just won't be able to put the investment. Their livelihood won't depend on it like a new airline or a new OEM. So they are helping, they are doing research, but I think once it's proved out by others, and I would love to be proved wrong on this, by the way, but we are seeing, airlines invest and, put, investments in companies like Zero-Avi and pre-orders for hydrogen aircraft. But, until that infrastructure really scales, the flights are going to be so expensive that, and even as sustainable as I am, I'm not going to pay $10,000 to fly from, Houston to Dallas just because it's zero emissions. It's just, the economy, it really drives it. So that's why I say, I think when you look at small airports, small underutilized airports, and then a new startup airline, by the way, if you're an entrepreneur and you're looking for a business, I've been saying this for 2 years and I haven't seen anybody do it. A small airline that could partner up with small airports. For example, there's one right up the street for me, Hicks Airport, that has a lot of space, and team up. It's just north of Houston, and team up with a regional airport, in Addison, Texas, Millionaire, like an FBO, and do like a direct flight where now I would pay more for that flight if I could just go to a convenient small airport and I don't have to. That's where I think the opportunity is. That's just me. Now, and that's how it could start. And then once it started to scale to larger aircraft, then I think that's when we're going to see our American, our United, our Southwest, and all of the other airlines be able to implement it.
So do you see starting with like a JetX, which is, they operate a bigger fuselage, but they're operating out of semi-private airports. They're operating fixed routes. And they're causing a lot of pain for the traditional airlines because they're trying to sue them. So they don't meet this regulation. Well, it's a great service. They're undercutting you on price. So is that kind of maybe, if you want to call it the JetX, so you have your regional, then you have your PJs, and then you have your JetX, and then you have your full commercial. So maybe it starts at that JetX level?
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of the underutilized regional airports have the capabilities to do, some even as big as like a 737. And a lot of them are also part of the cities, not all of them. Every airport is very unique to how they're structured, but some of them are part of the economic development program of the city. So there are always opportunities to go and talk to them. And if they're underutilized, then they're going to be very open-minded to what they can do, to bring business and attract new people to the city or to the airport. So it really doesn't so much matter on the type of aircraft as it does like the structure and whether or not they need it. And then, of course, the challenge becomes educating them on hydrogen. And you have to start with hydrogen did not cause the Hindenburg to explode. But that is probably the most challenging thing, even more challenging than scaling and making the infrastructure affordable, is just educating an airport and, say, a city council on hydrogen aviation, where they've never heard of it before, except, the Hindenburg. And I'm still, working out. I've been doing that for 6-7 years, and I'm still working out how, that message lands best because it didn't used to. I'm getting a little better.
And you have to say it 3 times. You can't forget about the 3 times. The third time is the charm. Let's fast forward to the future because I'm curious. Let's just say you have a global commercial airline that's operating a hydrogen fuel cell aircraft. Let's just do a common route. They take off at JFK. They go to CDG to Paris. I know airport codes. I'm that weird guy. So JFK to CDG, very common route. Are there any international regulations say, okay, well, you can't land in France with hydrogen, or in America? Nope, you can't. Because there's all sorts of, I'll call it, interesting regulations throughout the world. And aviation has those, especially when you go into South America and other smaller countries. Are there any regulations today from an international standpoint that could potentially slow down the adoption of hydrogen aircraft?
Oh, certainly not. It's actually quite the other way around. So a lot of, especially Europe, is very much pushing towards decarbonizing aviation. And the US has kind of lagged behind in advancing hydrogen aviation. So one thing that if we don't reduce our carbon emissions, then we will not be able to land in certain places, especially Paris. So Paris, and you see this a lot at the Paris Air Show, and there is, and I forget, I'm not the regulations and standards person, but there are other people more qualified than I that could cite exactly what those are. But one of them has to do with Paris in 2050. I just can't think of it right now. But, it will be the other way around, that if we don't do something, we will be kicked out of global aviation. So we really do need these startups pushing the needle forward.
10 years from now is 2035. And I say that it's going to be in a blink of an eye. And I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, and we're talking about the 90s and Soundgarden and Nirvana. And I remember like it was yesterday, and you realize, you're like, oh, and we're like, oh, crap, that was, 30 years. What the hell? And it kind of hits you. You're like, wow.
We must be the same age.
10 years, we're going to blink, and 2035 is going to be here. What will aviation look like? And do you think that we will start to see hydrogen in the aviation ecosystem in a meaningful way? That not this is, I don't like pilots. Not one pilot, not 2 pilots, but multiple, let's call it fleets of aircrafts.
Yeah. I think we can kind of take like the eVTOL advanced air mobility space and use that as an example, where if you look back 10 years ago, about 10 years ago, 2014, I believe, one of my favorite pictures is like the first transformative vertical flight event that Vertical Flight Society put together. And in that picture, you have Mike Hirschberg, you have Jobin Beaver, you have Mark Moore, you have Bud Scriba, you have Daryl Cummings, and many others that I'm forgetting. But a lot of the leaders now just about everybody, even an airport, a regional airport that's not really in the loop, they know what advanced air mobility is now. It's on mainstream news. We read about it in the paper. That, I think, is the way we can kind of look at it. But I think it will advance even a little bit faster because technology is just advancing faster in general anyway. Because of AI and technology, we're all doing things faster. So I think if you look at that 10, 11 years, what we've seen eVTOL go from like, what is this? What is the air taxi? What is advanced air mobility? That we're seeing just about any pilot, any aerospace engineer, anybody that's involved in an airport knows what advanced air mobility is, and they know what the air taxi market is. And that happened in 10 years. So then you look at 10 years, but also add to that AI, information speeding up. I think that, we'll be seeing it on mainstream news. I think we'll be seeing a couple of airlines. I think it'll be normal for people to say, like, I want, for like maybe filmmakers to say, I want to shoot this entire film with a drone. I'm going to use hydrogen fuel cells because I don't want to swap out my batteries and have to do a cut. I think that's where we could see like implementation. Like it'll just be common knowledge, which by the way, I have seen folks on YouTube do with their drones. And also, and looking at like, I want to make my own hydrogen on site because you can't buy hydrogen on Amazon. You can't get it at Walmart. But I think, in 10 years, it'll be common knowledge that I think people will start to understand what a hydrogen fuel cell is. And by the way, to the listeners, And this was really challenging for me at first. And this is the way somebody actually, shout out to Alex Ivanenko, former CEO of High Point, which ZeroAvia acquired, told me this about 8 years ago. Danielle, think of a fuel cell like a battery. The difference is the battery is holding the energy inside of the battery because, like, say you charge the battery and it's pulling the electrons from the outlet or whatever, right? And then those electrons are in the battery. A chemical reaction takes place and then electrons come out of the battery. With a fuel cell, the energy is stored in the hydrogen tank, but the hydrogen goes into the fuel cell, a reaction takes place, and electrons come out. So just think of a hydrogen fuel cell functioning very similar to a battery. That took me a long time to get. So a hydrogen fuel cell is still considered electric. The difference is the energy is stored in the tank versus the battery, it pulls it from the wall and it's stored in the battery. So that said, I think people will understand that. They will think of a hydrogen fuel cell as just a longer lasting battery, if you will, that also has a hydrogen tank. If they made hydrogen tanks this big, we could use them on our cell phones and they would last for a really long time. But I don't think I would love that. That would be such a cool thing. I think it'd be very expensive. But yeah, I think, it will be common knowledge. Our kids will be learning about it in school. Just a hydrogen fuel cell will be common in everyday life. And we'll get away from that, hydrogen and the explosion thing. And then by 2040, 2045, it'll be mainstream for sure. We'll be flying and driving.
So 2045 is the number that you're putting out there where hydrogen goes mainstream?
Yeah, commercial. Yes, for commercial. I think regional, it's going to be before that. I think 10 years, we'll see regional, we'll see advanced air mobility, we'll see drones. But your 737s type planes, 2045, because those people are not going to do it until they see it proved in the other areas and it becomes a little bit more affordable. So 2035, so 10 years from now, hydrogen fuel cells will be common knowledge, not just in aviation, but for everybody. We'll see hydrogen fuel cells coming online with every technology, and we will see them used in aviation with advanced air mobility, eVTOLs, drones, common knowledge, film, etc. Then 2045, we'll see it in commercial, and then maybe 2050 international, and that will probably be combustion.
So 2045, 20 years from now, you said it's going to be commonplace. So let's go back to the 90s, and there was the thing, I want my MTV. So it's 2045 going to be, I want my hydrogen? Is that where this is going to go?
Yeah, well, the funny thing is it's been around for so long. NASA puts fuel cells on just about everything that they put into space. So we've used hydrogen fuel cells so much. We just don't use them in everyday life. Like lay people, it's not commercial. We don't buy these technologies, but it's going to become. But yeah, I want my hydrogen. It's just going to be it's becoming easier to produce hydrogen renewably, sustainably from renewable energy, from nuclear, which I'm a big fan of. As we see hydrogen being easier to produce and not as expensive and dirty, then it becomes very cost competitive to fossil fuels. And we haven't really gotten there with sustainable energy yet, right? With just everything sustainable, with batteries, but we will be getting there with hydrogen. So hydrogen is just expensive, but if you look at what it can do, it's very competitive with natural gas, fossil fuels, jet fuel, everything. So we will get there. We will get there in 10 years. When
hydrogen becomes cost competitive is when it truly scales and unlocks all the commercial viabilities that come with it. Danielle, it's been fascinating. This has been a lot of fun. And I want my MTV with music videos, not reality shows, but I digress on that point. As we look to wrap up this insightful conversation, what would you like our listeners to take away with them today?
Oh, gosh, I would say join us on November 5th at Flying High. We will hear from the CEO of ZeroAvia. We will hear from the CEO of H2Fly. We will hear from the CEO or the vice president of Unither Bioelectronics. We will hear from folks that are flying with hydrogen right now, and you will see that it's here. Hydrogen aviation is here. It's November 5th. It's online. The tickets are practically free. They're $30. So just go to HYSKY.org, HYSKY.org, and you'll find all the things. And thank you so much, and reach out to me anytime.
Go join Flying High, because as you clearly articulated today, hydrogen aviation is here today. It is going to scale, and 2045 becomes the year it goes mainstream. Today is tomorrow. Tomorrow is today. The future is hydrogen. Danielle, thank you so much for coming on SAE Tomorrow Today.
Thanks, Grayson. It was my pleasure.
Thank you for listening to SAE Tomorrow Today. If you've enjoyed this episode and would like to hear more, please kindly rate, review, and let us know what topics you'd like for us to explore next. Be sure to join us next week as we explore Zipline's next generation approach to autonomous drone delivery.
SAE International makes no representations as to the accuracy of the information presented in this podcast. The information and opinions are for general information only. SAE International does not endorse, approve, recommend, or certify any information, product, process, service, or organization presented or mentioned in this podcast.